This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Welcome back to the Irish NFL Show as we continue to look on the 2026 draft. And Brian, let's come to the most intriguing pick for you of the 2026 draft. I already ventured for me that it was the Browns in general, as they seem to be building something quite special there if they can stack together what look at this point to be two very strong drafts.
I think a lot of it's my comments have been stolen in our opening segment of this particular show, Connor, because it was the Lemon selection for a couple of reasons, not necessarily because of what Craig's alluded to around, and he made some very valid points about Hurts wanting to get out in the perimeter, does his best work out to the sides, etc. It was more so about the makeup of the guy, and we spoke about this earlier on as part of our coverage in the lead up. Does he have the right mindset to go into Philadelphia? That for me is a questionable piece, because it's very much a very precarious place to play football, isn't it, Connor? I mean, when you're on top of your game and you're playing really well, you're fantastic. I think back to when the Black Friday game, and the Eagles are going to win a division, and yet the crowd are absolutely, disgruntled by the performance they were running against the Bears. A Bears team that nearly went to the NFC Championship game as well. So it wasn't like they're up against a mug team from last season. They're up against one of the best within the NFC conference. And yet the fans are on top of him. If he doesn't get off to the start, and it could be down to the fact of what Craig's alluded to, it could be down to the scheme. If he's not hitting the ground running,
it's also a franchise that seems to be very much falling out of favor or falling out of love with their quarterback. And, there was a lot of talk in the offseason, a major ESPN report about how disgruntled the Eagles are with Jalen Hurts, how they're finding it hard to find an offensive coordinator who wants to work with him, how he keeps changing the play at the line of scrimmage, how he's not doing what he's supposed to do, how they're going to lose one of the best wide receivers in the NFL over his partly over his behavior last year on what he did and didn't do within the offense. It's just not looking like a great setup for him.
Don, the head coach, is the type of guy that is helping the situation either. Like we've seen, I think Sirianni's kind of living off that Super Bowl in the previous year, or the previous Super Bowl, where he was antics on the sideline. But even Hurts at the time was saying, pipe down and get on to coaching, because he was kind of doing some unorthodox things in terms of during the stoppages in the game. Another thing that rattles my cage, and it's probably not necessarily around to the pick, Connor, but I'll throw it in here because it's relevant. Why do the Cowboys and Eagles keep doing trades together? It just doesn't make any sense. Why? If Lemon does turn out to be a fantastic selection, are the Cowboys not kind of saying, what are we doing to actually benefit a team with one of our closest rivals?
Remember we said this when the Bills traded with the Chiefs, and the Chiefs went up to take Xavier Worthy, and the Bills ended up with Keon Coleman, who they've given the dreaded vote of confidence to again today. I see Brandon Beane giving him the vote of confidence. Like I like you. I don't understand that. Like I hate. Don't do it.
Yeah, and they're not okay. The Bills and Chiefs aren't division rivals, but they've been AFC rivals in terms of going to the Super Bowl for the large parts of the last decade.
Like if the team makes the call and you're thinking, well, they're making this call because they're trying to get an advantage here, why would I give an advantage to my deadliest rivals?
Yeah, the Steelers actually, funny enough, are now actually more disgruntled with the Cowboys, because they're actually asking the question, why would you even consider doing this? The Steelers would just not go to business with the likes of the Bengals, the Ravens, even the Browns.
But you remember, to your point, when Mike Tomlin was steaming about the fact that the Browns allowed Joe Flacco to go to the Bengals. Like, what are you doing? Why would you let him go to a division rival like that? Why would you help out a division rival like that?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I know during the night we suggested maybe the reward that's been returned is extensive enough that they said, right, okay, we'll part with 3 places. Bear in mind, we're going to get someone a few slots later, but just doesn't strike me as something they should be doing. It's just, it's again, I mean, you think back as well, like we had the Smith and the Micah Parsons, during the draft, which Justin Fields was selected by the Bears when the Giants moved out. Like that was a crazy decision by the Giants, but they got leapfrogged as well because the Eagles and the Cowboys were doing business. It just doesn't make any sense. It's very rare to see, but yet these two teams seem to keep doing it together. I just don't get it.
Kieran Boyle, your most intriguing pick.
Oh, well, for me, I mean, the Jets are just, I mean, I mean, I'm almost speechless at what they did. I mean, it's very easy to win in the off season, but the Kenyon Sadiq pick for me is just it's fascinating to see the Jets get a bunch of offensive players who are actually good.
I was wondering where you were going with this. I thought the general consensus was the Jets picked really good players. That's why you're so intrigued, because the Jets picked really good players.
This is, I mean,
we said it on Thursday. What will Kieran say on Monday?
I mean, I'm going to give Muji his credit, because this is not a Jets GM. He's not your typical Jets GM. He's not Tannenbaum. He's not, this is not the kind of stuff Tannenbaum worked on. I love the pick of Sadiq. I mean, phenomenal player. I mean, he's built like a brick shit house, just running through people. He could be a defensive tackle, let alone a tight end. Just the work that he puts in and his catching ability. And you pair him with Mason Taylor. I mean, that's you see the Jets see the trend of the twin tight end.
Let me drop you a Sadiq chant right now. He's Sadiq. Ow.
I like it. Will it catch on in MetLife, though?
Aaron Glenn loves a bit of disco as well, doing the whole Earth, Wind and Fire down the sideline. Remember his little celly dance? He had a little celly down the sideline last year.
I mean, between that and AJ Cooper that they took as well, I mean, it's probably the most un-Jet-like draft I've seen probably ever. Now, again, I'll temper that all by saying that it's, the Jets are always Super Bowl champions of the offseason. So let's see how it all plays out. Remember, Geno Smith is still behind center. So they're definitely not going to – they'll be a little bit better this year, which means they could be 4-13 instead of 3-14. So they may be a little bit better this year. But it's definitely a stepping stone towards 27. They'll definitely have their eyes on whatever quarterback comes out. But it's incredible. I mean, if you're a Jets fan, I mean, how could you not love the draft? Everyone else loved it. It's just going to be I don't want to jinx it, but it might be pretty cool to watch the Jets put up points and actually have some playmakers on offense. So let's see how that works out.
Consider it jinxed. Craig, I'm loving the intrigue here.
I'm going to start by naming the player, and then I'm going to continue with everything else. Fernando Mendoza. Okay, now bear with me. This is less about the player and more about the moment that happened on Saturday night, and I'm talking deep into the 7th round. Okay. Ian Rappaport reports on the expectations that Kirk Cousins will enter training camp as the Raiders starter, and then a WWE-esque shoot somehow erupts between Charles Davis and Daniel Jeremiah over whether this is a smokescreen or whether this is true or not. And the broadcast just went crazy. They're talking about Rappaport coming in with a steel chair. They're literally going at it between the two of them. Daniel Jeremiah on the side of Mendoza's not going to start until halfway through the season. Charles Davis saying this is bull. He's going to start at the beginning of the season. They were really divided on this. So Rich Eisen takes control of the situation, says, look, what's going to be higher, their draft pick or the week that Mendoza starts? And they're going back and forth. The difference was like 4 weeks. The literal difference between the two of them was 4 weeks. But it does kind of bring up that intrigue around the fact that you now have Kirk Cousins and Fernando Mendoza on the same team. And where does it go? Like, what happens if Cousins, really disappoints during preseason? Do they throw Mendoza in? Or do they now let Cousins at least take it for 3-4 weeks in the same esque of Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart?
Can I jump in there, Connor? Sorry. I used to be one of these people that, oh no, let them mature, let them sit on the sidelines. Like, Mendoza has to start. Come on. This is Kirk Cousins. With all due respect, Kirk Cousins is on the wrong end. He got paid handsomely to go to Atlanta. He was struggling throughout the course of the season. In fact, this is the guy that actually wouldn't tell people internally that he was injured because he didn't want to give up his opportunity as quarterback because he knew Michael Penix was going to come in. And if Michael Penix had been in the future for the Falcons, he would have been secured his position and Cousins would have been out the door. He played last year because Penix wasn't up to scratch. There's no way, I just cannot fathom a situation where he was not told well in advance. Bear in mind that he's had this situation 2 years ago. Connor, I know it's different circumstances when they picked Penix in that draft when we were in Cork live streaming, and we were reacting in surprise to the pick. But he has to have been told, you're coming here to be the backup quarterback. There's absolutely no way. This Mendoza has been spoke about. It's like we spoke about during the night. Is there anything left to be said at the start of the stream? I know it was tongue in cheek, but it's been like the
I
keg of
hope you're not
beans for the Raiders.
suggesting that NFL insiders would go to bat for their source above the truth of the situation.
I think it hit the 7th round of the draft, and we all know what it's like to watch the 7th round of the draft, and necessarily not even talking about the draft anymore. They're gone off, as you said, they're gone off to watch some pineapple make a selection, and he said we need to get the intrigue, we need to get the audience back in here. Let's have a deep and meaningful about Mendoza starting number 1. Mendoza will start number 1. If they start Cousins, they're going to be 0-5. He's on a hiding to nothing in a very difficult division anyway. It'll be a lost season for the Raiders. I actually think the Raiders have done pretty well over this offseason, and I think it'll be all lost if they don't start Mendoza. You got to see the guy develop. And they paid a huge centre, a lot of money to protect your number 1 pick, not to be protecting Kirk Cousins. Rant over.
I think it's going to be a similar situation with the Giants from last year, where when Wilson started and then Dart went in. I think he's going to. I think
or like the Patriots did with Drake May. I think
exactly.
Cousins probably starts a couple of games, just
Yes.
take the edge off the situation. Get those ones over the hump and just let the expectation level drop a little bit low before you put them in.
And if they go 1-2, 2-2 bonus, we're okay. We're treading water. All right, now it's your turn. Even going back to Kurt Warner and Eli way back in 23 or 2003, 2004. The other thing I want to say about the Raiders is what happened to all the wideouts that they needed? I don't see any wide receivers in that draft. With all the picks that they had, I do like the Mike Washington pick. That's a great running back out of Arkansas. But you would think with the amount of picks they had and with the immediate need they have to get weapons out there, you would think they might have gone in the middle rounds to try and get some at least one.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Maybe too, but between safeties, edges, corners, centers, not out there. So unless they're doing, unless they're going to do work in free agency still and try and pick up a few other people. But I was concerned with that for the Raiders.
Oh, they'll pick up Odell Beckham Jr. That sounds like that's the thing that's likely to happen.
No.
It's trolling the Giants fans. Yeah. Craig, you get first shot, first pick at the gem of the draft. Who's your gem of the 2026 NFL draft?
Well, we took a little shot at the Dolphins earlier for their first pick of the draft, but I've got Chris Johnson from San Diego State as my hidden gem. Miami entered that draft with a cornerback room of Storm Duck and Darrell Baker Jr., which is enough to make any Dolphins fan horrifically nervous to look at their
sounds like
draft.
A terrible 90s hip-hop duo. Storm Duck and...
So they did what they needed to do. They traded up, pick 27, grabbed Chris Johnson, number 2 cornerback on most consensus boards. There was a big gap between the trade up of Mansfield Delane, which I'm surprised none of us have touched on as of yet, to be honest, and Chris Johnson going. But his 4 interceptions last year and 8 pass breakups is more than those two had combined. In fact, it's more than 90% of the roster that the Dolphins have at cornerback combined. So I really, really like this pick, and I think Chris Johnson sneaky good as well. So that's my hidden gem.
Well, let's not skip over the Delane point then. You think that Delane was a reach for the Chiefs?
I just feel like it wasn't just the fact that it was a slight reach for the Chiefs. I just feel like I don't know why unless they had been tipped off that somebody else was going up for Delane. I just don't understand why you wouldn't have just stuck at 9 and taken him.
I kind of remember scratching my head. I can't remember whether we said it live at that time, but to your point, it didn't look like, based on all the intel we had, and I assume the Chiefs had better intel than we did, that they were going to have to jump to get him. Like, it looked like he was going to fall that way anyway. In fact, I don't see any of the teams to pick between 6 and 9 going that way. It would have happened anyway.
I think, sorry, just jump in, Connor. I think we suggested on the night that they felt that the Giants wouldn't go Reese. They felt the Giants might stick to either Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles, and therefore Reese might fall to 6. And all of a sudden, they did take a defensive tackle further down with Peter Woods, but they were obviously keen to get another defensive guy up front.
They may not have jumped for Delane at all. Yeah, sorry, that made sense.
And because Delane was the first, Delane was on high up on their board anyway at 9, they said, okay, well, we're here where we are, but let's take Delane. That was the thought process. Kieran might have a different alternative.
I can't remember what podcast it was that I listened to, but they said the Chiefs went up for Delane, which is eye-opening.
Well, they had a huge need at corner. I mean, look at all the corners and safeties they lost. They had to go for somebody like
McDuffie. Kieran, who's your gem?
I talked about his partner in crime earlier on. I loved the Messidor pick. Watching him and Bain last year, or actually the last couple of years. But he's a guy the Chargers need. Again, we talk a lot about the Chargers needing identity. They what do they have on defense? What is their calling card? Player like him is going to be a big addition. Nice season last year, 63 tackles, 12.5 sacks, 17.5 tackles for loss. He's the kind of guy you need to bring in there just to do work. And I have to think that the fact that he was, again, similar to Love and Jadarian Price, you have to think that he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Good friends with Bain, obviously, but overshadowed as well by the Bain talk. And he wants to put his stamp on the league and say, listen, I'm as good, if not better than that guy too. So I got something to show as well as Bain does. And the Chargers need, they need something like that on that defense. And obviously edges were all the rage for this draft. So it's a nice pickup for the Chargers. I do have an honorable mention. I talked about him a lot last year. Dalen Everett went to the Steelers, the cornerback. Love this guy's game. 6'1", about touch under 200 pounds, just lightning fast, and he hits like an absolute train. So I'll be looking to see how he does. Nice Georgia product. So out of Norfolk, Virginia. Well, let's see how he does. I did like that. I think he's going to be a really good player in the league.
One of my gem, Kieran, was Jermod McCoy, just purely because I'm trying to speak this into existence. I hate to see a player with that kind of talent slide. Obviously there's good reasons for that. The ACL was going to be a problem when we always knew it was going to be. This guy had first round talent, slid all the way to the fourth. I think at that level, it was well worth the risk for the Raiders to take him. And, I applaud them for doing so. And I hope that works out for both sides. The other one, Kieran, that I had my second favorite, and I'm just interested in your take on this because we were talking about the Jets having a good draft, is D'Angelo Ponce. This is a guy that looks like he's ready to rumble. I remember you mentioned him in the draft preview, like, this guy is nasty. He hits and you stay hit.
Oh yeah. And coming from Indiana, the thing with what Cignetti did, I don't want to say he was trying to build an NFL style roster. A lot of the players that he brought in were big bruisers, and they were older, slightly older. They were almost in the mid-20s. And he was a transfer too that was brought in. Again, just a lot. These corners. The other thing to remember is a lot of these corners are converted wide receivers, so they are equally talented on both sides of the ball. Their talent level is beyond a lot of things that we can comprehend. Every little thing about them is really impressive. So I love that Ponce pick. It's just another example of a player just maxing out his ability. And again, we'll see what he does. Very very interesting.
Finally, for this one, Brian, your gem.
I don't know necessarily whether it's a gem, but it could be a gem of a story next season because the Steelers selected wide receiver Jeremy Bernard in the second round, and it's unusual and so strange that sometimes what happens to circumstances beyond the Steelers' control leads to them selecting a different wide receiver, and 2 or 3 years down the line, you're saying, if that hadn't have worked out, we never would have got the receiver. Maybe that's the storyline next year we're talking about. Maybe Hammond doesn't hit the ground running, and Jeremy Bernard has a great first opening season with the Steelers. Okay, right now we don't know who's going to be the quarterback. Inevitably, probably will be Aaron Rodgers, but he might turn out to be the gem that they really need because they are struggling with wideouts, and maybe he's the guy that will unleash. He's coming from Alabama. He will know it's a strong program in the college game, so he'll be ready for the Steelers environment, I imagine. But it could be an interesting one to keep an eye on next season.
Craig.
Talking of Steelers wide receivers, a little shout out as well. Eli Heidenreich from Navy, who was picked just after his other Navy colleague had been. I think Eli Heidenreich's one of these kind of gadgety players who gives you kind of Taysom Hill vibes, like that he could just end up doing anything for a team, and for him to be picked and come out on stage, with the Steelers' final pick in the draft was just a little nice moment. But
yeah, I heard him called out on a podcast in the run up to the draft as a player that somebody had fallen in love with. Just thought, yeah, to your point, this guy could have a long and very exciting career in the league, that there's a home for him somewhere, and that they hoped he ended up in the right place. Sorry, I stole your thunder there, but that's
No,
that's
that was
what
the
you're
end
going to
of
say.
it.
Right, we're going to wrap up by talking about the pick that we think teams will regret the most. This is more for me. I've taken an overall approach to it. I'm looking at the Buffalo Bills, who leaned heavily on defense again. I'm just thinking back to this time last year. Brandon Beane comes out and he's spitting fire on a podcast in New York, saying how everybody's got it wrong. The Bills' offense is in perfect shape. They slide out of the playoffs in a spot that they shouldn't have slid out of the playoffs, where it was all set up for them because they just didn't do enough around Josh Allen. We talked about how Beane kind of seemed to have tacitly accepted that, despite going to the mattresses to argue the opposite point when they traded for DJ Moore. And then they lean heavily on defense again. I just don't understand what the Bills are doing and why they don't put more around Josh Allen. You know, the Rams are facing all these questions for going for Ty Simpson. The Bills trade twice out of the first, 3 times, I think, out of the first round. They don't make first round selection at all. And most of the selections they take, I think they took a receiver late on in the draft, but most of the selections they took then of their picks in 2026 were on defense. This seems like it could be Groundhog Day for Buffalo, and they'll be asking a lot of questions about Brandon Beane, and he may have traded himself down out of a job with the way things went from last season if there isn't signs of improvement on that Bills offense. Brian, who do you think is going to regret their pick, or which pick do you think is going to be the most regrettable?
I think there's a tandem here with this, Connor. I think the Cardinals hate Sonny Styles' element. I think it should have been the opposite way around. I think the Titans need Sonny Styles more right now than a wide receiver. And I think the Commanders need a wide receiver more than Sonny Styles right now. We spoke about it last week in our NFC East preview around McLaurin's coming to the back end of his career. They got to put some more talent around Jaden Daniels. I thought Carnell Tate would have been the better fit there. Look, Sonny Styles is a fantastic player. We spoke time and time again. But even going to 7 was a bit of a drop for him. But I just think where the Titans are, I think defensively they could have done with him in there. Okay, Cam Ward needs talent. He needs players around him. But it just strikes me as one of those in a couple of years when they rehash the draft and they look back of where everybody went, that one for me would have been probably more ideally suited to be the other way around.
Kieran, regrets, they've had a few. Who do you think will be regretting their pick?
Well, I think I'm going to go a slightly different tack with a player who's going to make people regret not taking him, and that is that could go in a different direction for Caleb Downs. I mean, I think the fact that the Giants passed him, I don't want to say they passed him, but the fact that he went to the Cowboys as opposed to everyone thought he was going to drop there. I think there's a player who I think is going to make other teams regret not taking him. That's the kind of the spin I'm putting on this. Is Cade Klubnik. Klubnik from Clemson that ended up going to the Jets. Again, we got to remember the situation with the Jets, the quarterback situation. It could go south in a hurry. And with the players that they've drafted on offense, is there an opportunity there to put in maybe Klubnik if he has the ability to do it? Again, Saturday afternoons for me are all about college football. I watched a lot of him at Clemson. I like his arm, not overly big, but I would have taken him earlier than Ty Simpson, but that's a whole different conversation. But I think somebody like Klubnik, look at the situation that he's going into with the Jets. Other than Brady Cook, I mean, that's a really kind of a paltry situation for quarterbacks in New York. So I think if it goes south for the Jets with the quarterback situation in September, nothing to lose really putting him in there. And I mean, you got the weapons out there. It could be an opportunity for him to say, hey, look, I went in the 6th round. I could have gone a little earlier. I got talent. I got skills. This is what y'all missed out on. So keep an eye on Klubnik maybe doing some work in the fall.
Will do. Craig, you get the honor of the final pick of our draft recap. Who's your big regret?
Well, we started off with me stealing Kieran's pick, and then Kieran went and mentioned Caleb Downs. So I think we've come full circle quite beautifully here. The fact that the Giants passed on Caleb Downs, but then you also had the Commanders who passed on him as well. 2 teams that I personally thought he would be a perfect fit at. And then the Cowboys obviously see their opportunity, trade up 1 pick with the Dolphins to make sure that they secure their man and select what some people call the best overall player in the draft. He now gets to circle 4 games a year, 2 against the Commanders, 2 against the Giants, and has 4 opportunities to show what they're missing out on. But I mean, equally, you could also turn around and say that the Giants passing on Sonny Styles is also one that they could regret. The Giants had an opportunity there to get two absolute blue chip defensive stars there who were outstanding at their singular position. Now, this could all become a moot point if Arvell Reese turns into an absolute monster at a middle linebacker position. And then, Malagai decides to be an elite level guard for us, which I think is doable as well. But the Giants are playing a very, very big risk reward game here. And it'll be interesting to see how that goes as the next few years progress.
All right, that's the end of our 2026 draft recap. You can watch back, if you choose to, the full 3-hour all the Razzmatazz live watch along from the Arlington Hotel, which is up on YouTube and all our other social channels. We've clipped that out for those of you who want to skip over the best bits, but it's hard to know what to leave out. There were so many good bits. What comes next? We have the schedule coming up. Schedule launch in a couple of weeks' time. Around about May 13th, we believe. We'll get the full list of all the international games then as well, of course, and start doing some travel planning. Also, for our first ever Irish NFL show fan trip to the US in association with Bernard Hayes Travel. Very much looking forward to bringing you full details of that. And thanks to everyone who has registered their interest in that with the Irish NFL show and Bernard Hayes Travel.